Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang achariyang namasami. Recently I had an interesting conversation with an elderly lady. She had been born as a 7-month baby, being forced out of the womb with 7 months, and she said that during that time, about 70 years ago, what they did with a 7-month baby was they put it into a shoebox for 3 days and 3 nights, and to see whether the baby can survive. Yeah, I found it, I think this unbelievable, but the lady said it was common practice during that time. So when we talk about developmental traumas or traumas from early childhood, that's probably the worst case. Spending the first 3 days of your life in a shoebox. So that lady survived, and is very highly developed spiritually, and she worked with people who are seriously handicapped by these kind of developmental traumas. And later also she worked with people who are physically handicapped, like people who are deaf. So I asked her if she had the choice, if you could choose being blind, because my grandmother spent her last 10 years in bed blind, and she was always in a good mood. 10 years blind in bed. And so I asked her what she would prefer, being blind or being deaf. And she, without hesitating, she said being deaf, because from her own experience, she said these people don't seem to miss anything at all. They function normally in their life, and they don't know that they are lacking something or anything. And then we explored that later, and for blind people it's the same thing. If you are born blind, imagine that you don't know that something is lacking, something is missing. And suppose, like, later problems might arise when you meet with people who can see, and you might notice that something is kind of, they might have advantages in certain ways. Suppose you give a blind person two objects, identical objects, and one is red and one is white. The blind man could probably identify the red one, just because the energy of it is different. But if you give him a book to read, and make use of the information in the book to get something to eat, find where the fridge is, and probably could not do that. But try to convince a blind person that they are blind. It's not so easy, because they function very well, and then they don't know how it is, like a fish in water. Doesn't know the water unless he swallows a bait with a hook in it, and you pull it out of the water, then he knows. So suppose you have this blind person, and there is a cure for that. But it's not like just getting a jab or eating some pills. It takes a long time, and it's an arduous thing, and it takes a lot of commitment. And you actually have to change your whole life, and if you do that for many years, then eventually you will be able to see. So how many blind people would be willing to do that? But they don't even know that they are blind, and they don't know what it is when you can see. You can describe it, but there is no way to convince them. So there might be some people who are willing to undergo this kind of procedure, and most of them probably would give up sooner or later. because it just takes too long time and it's too difficult, and change of diet and change of life and doing difficult things, and nothing seems to happen. And they say, so why bother anyways? Because they seem to function very well, everything is okay, and they don't know what seeing means, and they don't know what blind means, so they give up the whole thing. So with Buddhism, some enlightened being, some arahant comes and tells you that he is an arahant, an enlightened being, and that you are a fool. Full of suffering, full of greed, hatred and delusion, and he describes a difficult path of practice, and you can become enlightened as that person is. So most people would not buy that. People in the world generally, they don't know that they are full of greed, hatred and delusion, and they don't know that they are suffering from that. After all, we have a good life, and money, we have a job, we have a car, a lot of exciting things to do. And nobody, not many people are interested in these kind of things. So when we talk about enlightenment, we do not know what that is. Or when we talk about arahantship or anagami, non-return, or even a sotapanna, we don't know what that is. The other way, I overheard a discussion about sotapanna, and I thought, what would I say if you would ask me what a sotapanna is? There I would probably say, I don't know. I do not really know. Okay, we know the word. We know the word. And those who are around for some time, we don't even know about the 10 fetters. We can remember the 10, these the English words, the 10 fetters, and we know something that the sotapanna has cut off the first 3 fetters. And we know the names, at least the English names. And okay, let's go through the three things. The easiest is probably doubt. Doubt. Mm-hmm. When the Buddha gave his first sermon, and Anya Kondanya saw the Dhamma, the reason why he saw the Dhamma is because he did not have doubt in the Buddha. Because when the Buddha was a baby, his father, the king, summoned a number of seers to the court and predicting the baby's future. And most of them said, there are 2 ways for the baby. Either he will become a great king, a ruler of the world, or he will become a Buddha. But one of these seers, the youngest ones, his name was Kondanya, he said, for this baby, the person is only one possible outcome. He will become a fully enlightened Buddha. And then the Buddha grew up, and all these seers passed away and left their sons and daughters behind, and Kondanya grew old. And when the Buddha went forth, Kondanya asked 3 of his friends, who were sons of the other seers who had predicted 2 different outcomes for the Buddha, to go ahead and follow the Buddha. So when the Buddha finally said he was enlightened, Kondanya himself was immediately convinced, because he himself had predicted that person will become a Buddha. So he did not have doubt at all. So this is why he could really pay attention, he could listen and could attend to the Dhamma. So doubt, when we start with the practice, we do not have very much doubt. We have what we call faith. But this faith is kind of not very well grounded, and we can lose it very easily. So when it comes to doubt, suppose someone is, I have said that before, suppose you are on a hike through a barren area where there's no water, and they say over there, a couple of days, through the desert there is a well, and there is a certain kind of rock formation or something someplace, and there is a well there with water, and you go there and you will survive, and you miss it, then you will not survive. And you go along and there's always doubt, like just when you take a walk here in the bush and you lose your way and get lost, there's doubt immediately and starts to panic. And so that person is on his way to that well and is always like fear, anxiety, doubt, worries, all these kind of things. But he keeps going because he doesn't have a choice. So finally, he arrives there at that spot, and there is a well. And he looks down and he can see the water. So in that moment, there is no more doubt anymore, and that could be Sodapana experience. You really see it. But if this Sodapana experience is not genuine, then other people will come and tell you, he says, no, you're wasting your time here. There's water there, but the water is not drinkable. It is arsenic water, and you drink it, you die. And they tell you somewhere else close by here is a whole lake with fresh water, and you should better go there. So you see, doubt is coming back again, even if you've seen the water. So even things like doubt are very difficult to understand. The next thing is the second fetter would be like not being attached to rituals and practices and rules and things, these kind of things. Because the Sodapanna really knows that what he has done so far and what the teachers say is leads to good results. So this is kind of tangible, like knowing what is conducive to the practice and what not. But the first one, that is the problem. The first one is Sakkaya Ditthi. So what is that? That is, I would say, that is equivalent with Sodapanna experience, and we don't know what that is. It's just not possible. Some things we can know only when we have overcome these things, when they are gone already. But when we are in the middle of these things, we cannot know it. So it's very difficult to know. We can have, all what we can have is views and opinions and perceptions of these kind of things, but that's not the real thing. Like we wanted people in this world here, we know nothing. We know nothing very much. We know very little. We think we know, but it's just all perceptions. Perception is not knowledge. Perception is what we think it is. Like suppose take a tree in the forest. We might know the name of the tree. It's a yellow bloodwood. But what we see is only half of the tree. The other half is in the ground. We do not see that. So we don't know that, or like mobile phones. We all have our mobile phones, but we don't know what that is. We can use it, but we don't know what it is. This light here, solar power, comes from the sun. Somehow we can make the sunlight into electricity. We don't know what the sun is. So not like the indigenous Australians, they knew their world, but we know nothing. We don't know what the coronavirus is, and we don't know how the vaccine works, and all these international relationships. We have no clue about the whole thing. So when we start to practice, we start from a place of ignorance, like blind people. So the Buddha's approach is not telling a blind man about the state of enlightenment, but he points out to him that he has a kind of disease. So, okay, now let's take another person, someone who has kind of different kind of pains and aches and headache and toothache and the body aching and it's kind of difficult a little bit. But still you get even used to that. So the Buddha tells us that we are in a state of a serious lack and that they suffer from that. And the disease is, of course, greed, hatred, and delusion, which sounds kind of reasonable. And we think we know what it means, greed, what greed means, and what hatred means, and what delusion means. But maybe we do not know that. When you are in delusion, you don't know that you are deluded. And when you are born with greed and hatred, we do not even know that. In the Visuddhimagga, they talk about the different characters. They say a greed character does not see his own greed because he's born with that, he lives with greed, but he might know hatred. So the greed character thinks he's a hatred character. And vice versa. A hatred character is born with hatred and he cannot see his own hatred because he lives with that since birth. But he knows a little bit of his greed. So how do we start the practice with these kind of things? Like Ajahn Sudhammo often talks about it. He says, knowing like our likes and dislikes, know when emotions come up, wholesome and unwholesome, and know greed and hatred. Once a group of American students with Ajahn Sudhammo, they came to Bunyavad, and one of these people, he said wherever he goes and he meets a spiritual master, he asks always the same question. He says, what is freedom? How would you define freedom? And Ajahn Sudhammo just laughed and he said, well, this is easy to answer. Freedom means being free from greed, hatred, and delusion. So he's not talking about jhanas or about what nirvana is or about the things that we cannot grasp. He talks about very simple things, greed, hatred, and delusion. So we work in these kind of things. We don't have to talk about anatta in this stage in the practice. Talk about what causes us suffering. So, but then the next obstacle is when we start practicing and we live in a community like this here, there is very little greed and hatred coming up. Or when you are a monk for 20 years or even more, like in Theravadin, almost 50 years, there's nothing happening that triggers greed and hatred. People are polite and kind and he gets everything he wants. And they built him a beautiful koti, and before he needs something, people offer it already. And nobody is threatening him, he does not hear bad words, and so it's very easy not to feel greed and hatred. But as soon as we are in a difficult situation, outside the monastery, and something comes up, greed and hatred comes back again immediately. Just the slightest thing happening and we get irritated already. So spiritual practice is about paying attention, being aware. The Buddha described the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Starts with the body and with like mental states, feelings, mental states, things like that. Just knowing what is going on in our bodies and in our mind at any given point of time. Sounds pretty straightforward, and I think it can be done. But when the practice gets a little bit better, then there is not only like and dislike, there is also something in between that is called neither like nor dislike. That could be the way to equanimity, but it could also be kind of negligence, just couldn't care less or bother and not concerned, things like that. So what we need for this kind of practice is we should have very, very good sati, knowing ourselves throughout the day. Know what is going in our body and our mind, what is going on. when we make contact to anything. Either mental contact or physical contact, or hearing something, seeing something. And know what is happening, how we respond to that. So the Buddha says the practice is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is our proper, the Buddha says this is where someone who practices Dhamma should dwell on during his awake hours, 20 hours a day. He's not talking about getting samadhi or getting the jhanas. Just do that. Have mindfulness present and know when like and dislike arises and how it arises and how it passes away. So we all think we have mindfulness already. But if that would be the case, then that would not be such a major topic in Buddhism if we had that already. So we might be maybe question that we have that. Maybe we do not have mindfulness. We can function and we can talk and we can do our duties and we know what day it is today and what is going to happen tomorrow and all these kind of things, walking from here and there. But that is maybe not what is meant with mindfulness. There are 2 kinds of mindfulness. One kind of mindfulness has an object. And the other kind of mindfulness is resting and knows what is happening. So that is something like a broad focus. We do 2 kinds of practices. We sit in meditation and try to find a meditation object where we can stay with for long periods of time. But what is happening normally is we have to bring the mind back and it runs away and bring it back and it runs away. When Ajahn Sudhammo talks about samadhi and even Rinpoche talks about that, they are not talking about the jhanas. They say just a little bit of concentration is enough. If the jhanas were necessary to attain Sotapanna, we would not be able to attain Sotapanna easily. Rinpoche says what we need is upachara samadhi, which is kind of possible, but even that is only possible when we do the practice in everyday life for years and years and years on end, training ourselves in mindfulness, knowing what is happening in the here and now, right now, and know whether they are carried away by our likes and our dislikes, irritated or pleased, angered or pleased. So what normally happens with us is we immediately shift from ourselves to that thing or that person that causes greed or hatred. And we blame the whole thing on that person. Suppose, just for as an example, during mealtime, and there are 2 pieces of cakes left, and the person in front of you takes both pieces. It's just, you don't do that. And you want one of these, and that he takes both of these pieces. You see that what happens is we blame that person for our own greed and hatred. So there is a shift of attention already. We do not no longer see what is happening in our own heart. We blame it on that person, and our anger is kind of justified because it's just such a shame. Especially it happens oftentimes. So the practice is not to find someone who is guilty and responsible for what is happening to us, but always coming back to the present moment. Always the practice is only, when I said before, we don't know anything. The only thing what we can know is what is happening right now in our own mind and what is happening right now in our own body. All other things is, you cannot call it knowing. That is kind of labeling or presuming things, or having views, opinions, or perception. That is the third khandha, is perception. You think that is true, but it's just a perception. Before I said a fool does not pay attention, or you could also say paying attention to the wrong thing. In the language of the Dhamma, that is called ayoniso manasikara, or what we do is proper attention, yoniso manasikara. That is, we have to know how to pay attention to the right things. And again, that is paying attention to what is happening right now within ourselves. That is where the practice is. The practice is right here within our own mind and in our own bodies. So, when you think about it, it's rather simple. But so how come that we are not enlightened already after many years of practice, if it is so simple? If you were a blind man and you try that kind of cure, you would all have given up already. But it is also a fact that we are oftentimes in mental states which are not wholesome, which cause suffering for us. I mean, it is obvious that a state of irritation or of being anxious or angry or something like that, agitated, that is not a happy kind of state of mind. So the Buddha describes the thing, he says, what we have is a serious mental disease. And we have to know that. So what we have to know is suffering. The Buddha describes suffering. He says, what is suffering? He says, birth, aging, and death is suffering. So this is kind of, for young people, probably not so easy to understand. When you get older, it becomes more apparent. But the other thing is sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair is suffering. The Buddha wants us to know, to really know and understand unwholesome state of mind which cause us suffering. Ordinary people in the world who do not practice the spiritual path, they think even unwholesome emotions are good and necessary. They say these unwholesome emotions add flavor to life. They say it's good to experience anger and even despair and things like that, or crying and weeping. They say that is part of life, and they don't want to miss these kind of things. It is just part of the whole thing, and they want to experience everything, the good one and the good things and the bad things as well. They say it's just and you experience anger, you live it out. And when you are frustrated, and you live that. And when you have experience like suffering, despair, and then you cry. Yeah, that's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha said we have to know what we experience is conducive to happiness or conducive to suffering. What we experience or what we think, what we speak, what we do, if that is conducive to our own well-being, and whether it is conducive to the well-being of other people. And if we clearly know that it is not conducive and that it leads to suffering, or is suffering in fact, then we should kind of get rid of that thing as soon as possible and not act out it and live it out and act it out. And so we have to try to like the tendency of these kind of things, that these things get less and less. When they talk about a Sodabana, they say a Sodabana has less greed and hatred. So when we want to know how far we are on the path, maybe we can look there. How much greed and hatred do we still have left? How much irritation do we still have left? So when I went down last couple of months ago down to Simo in that monastery, Nikotarama, and there's a lot of difficult issues to settle and problems and all kind of problematic things to solve. And I saw with myself that it kind of really sets me up and disturbs me, and up to the point that I could not sleep properly, could not go to sleep easily, because the mind would just bringing these things up again and again. So, you see, as soon as something happens, what we have attained so far, like calm and peaceful and quiet, it's not genuine. It goes easily. People get upset when there is one single mosquito in the room. People get irritated already. One single mosquito. So the practice seems to be straightforward and easy, but we have to do it again and again and again and again. And the practice is easy in the beginning, and then the Buddha says beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end. But that's not what we experience. It is most often it is beautiful in the beginning, but then it becomes difficult in the middle. When we're stuck somewhere and we don't get the results, what we are looking for. Mm-hmm. And then we have to persevere and get through the whole thing and do it again and again. This is why living in a monastery is conducive, because we do not have a choice. There is a schedule. And we are supposed to be impeccable with the schedule. Maybe not 100%, there are bad days, you cannot get up in the morning, so now and then that is acceptable. But normally the whole schedule, the whole monastic training is a fixed set of rules, and we have signed a contract, especially for monks. You sign a contract, you are in for it, and we have to do these kind of things, whether we like it or not. That's not the issue. Like this morning, Ajahn came, he just made a statement. He said, Sudhammo is giving Dhamma talk. He did not ask me, Sudhammo, would you please? He just made a statement. So it's not that I really enjoy these kind of things, but you do it. And then it's not a problem. These whole practices, if we accept that, then the problem is kind of solved and finished. They say do this, they say yes sir, and then we do it. You like it or not, it doesn't really matter. And when they said that the meeting will be in the sala, okay, it's stone cold, and we have head shaving day as well, and I cannot wear my beanie because I'm on the video camera, so we just do that. Like we don't create drama out of all these small little things. We just do it. We just do it as good as we can, again and again and again, and get yourself out of the way. So the purpose of the holy life is just doing it, living it. It's not about enlightenment. It is okay. We should not forget the bigger picture as well. But if it's just Buddhism is a way of life. And there are three modes of practice. One is for lay people living outside, coming to the monastery. The other one would be like anagarika or anagarikas, spending long periods of time in the monastery, and the next one would be being a real and ordained monk or nun. And so that is a way of life. We decide on that, and hopefully when we have lived that life for a period of time, you would not like to go back into lay life. So people ask me, when they ask you about disrobing, they asked even Ajahn Sudhammo if he ever considered disrobing. Yeah, so then I think about myself going back to lay life. Yeah, that would be such a shame, just throwing the whole thing away. I would certainly not. There's nothing to be gained out there. So it does not mean like a life in the monastery is always easy. It does not mean good things are easy to do. It's more on the contrary. Good things are normally difficult to do. Just like, for example, speaking proper English. How many of us who are not native speakers of English can really speak proper English? Nobody. We can kind of get by, but even these kind of things are difficult to learn. So just give yourself totally wholeheartedly to the Dhamma and do the meditation practice every day, 6 hours. We have 8 hours now every day. So that is not a burden. That is a golden opportunity to do that. You might, at a later point in your life, not being in a monastery anymore and getting lost in lay life out there somewhere, and might be difficult to come back because a lot of obligations in lay life, and then you might think back of these times when you have been in the monastery and had 8 hours of formal meditation practice a day. What a blessing that is. Living in an environment like this we have here, but Buddha Dhamma, in the middle of the national park, in the middle of the bush. That is just such an immense blessing, and we cannot take these kind of things for granted. People come and offer food every day. So normally monks in Thailand are very much concerned about receiving gifts from lay people. They think they have to pay it back in the next life. So that means all of us here right now in the monastery, we have to do our duty as good as we possibly can, so that the lay people who offer food and offer everything we need, that they get the money, they give something to people who are worthy of gifts, worthy of offerings. That is normally a description of an enlightened being, but even if we are not yet enlightened, we have to try to make ourselves into someone who is worthy of these kind of offerings, that the donors can really get the merit out of that. So, and it means our side of the deal is our duties as a monastic, as a monk, or as a lay person practicing in the monastery, which we do pretty well. We do it quite well, but still things can get tedious. We do it again and again and again, and just how to maintain, to keep it fresh every day. New things are always good, but when it goes on for 3 months or 3 years or 10, 20 years. Ajahn Sudhammo has been a monk now for 47 years, and what he does now in the mornings, he watches the news in his mobile phone, and he's just chuckling and smiling and laughing about the news, about bad news. For the only person who listened to the news and then so it might take quite some time to get the results. And we get the results only if we do the practice. And to do the practice correctly, we have to listen to the teachings as well. This is what we do here. Here they offer sutta classes, and there are Dhamma talks, and Ajahn Kemawaro gives readings in the morning, Luang Chang, and things like that. And so when these things are offered, we have to pay attention. And when you have free time, maybe study the suttas, read these kind of things, try to get the bigger picture. It is only perception, and it is only judgment. We cannot understand according to where we are at the moment. We don't grasp the whole thing, but still we don't know what anatta means. But we can develop something that is called anatta sanya, perception of anatta. It's not a real thing, but that is what we can do. We can reflect on these things again and again. You lay people like not we monks, Ajahn Sudhammo is discussing his book with you. So this is a huge blessing. I thought, what about us monks? we don't know. But you get these once a week.
Yeah.
Huh? I listen to that as well. Yeah, I thought about it. Yeah. Yeah. The practice is threefold. They say pariyat, patipat, pativek. Pariyat, the first thing is study, the formal Dhamma, what we can read in the suttas, in the scriptures. But what we have in the suttas, in the thick books, in the volumes, it's over 90 volumes. The Pali Canon, it's a whole 90 volumes. So, and it can be quite confusing. But when you listen to what Buddha says, for instance, that is much closer, and it is, I think, like when we study the scriptures, we need someone to guide us into the scriptures, to guide us through. When you open the book, Tipikaka is just too much. But readings from the Buddha in the morning, these kind of things, that normally we forget it straight away and go on to other things. But these things are kind of, and they maybe just guide you through the whole day or things like that, again and again. Hearing and again, sometimes Ajahn Kema reads the same thing again, and people say, you read it already. Yeah. Ajahn Dan keeps giving the same Dhamma talks since 30 years. Luang Por Sameda talks only about one thing, now is knowing, since 50 years. Yeah. So it takes quite some time to drive home the point before they get it. And we are very stubborn creatures, and we are full of our own views and ditthis and things like that. And to soften down and to calm down and to surrender to the practice and to what the Buddha has to offer, what Buddhism has to offer, that takes, this is called the third thing of the 10 paramis is nekama, relinquishment. Yeah. Give it up, throw it away. Give yourself surrender. It's called surrender. Surrender to the practice. Dedicate your life to the practice. So today is robe washing day, head shaving day. Tomorrow is the first Obo Saturday in the rains retreat. And today is also there was a famous pop song many decades ago. This day is the first day of the rest of your life. So try to make the best out of that. Okay, I offer this for your reflection. Evan.
Nandamayanam Napatayo Sadhu Karanga Namaste. Sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu Anumodana